doing this first part. We've done a couple of these before. We did some environmental ones this fall, and tonight we're going to do one about some true crime local to LaPorte, Indiana. And then next month, we're going to do one about dementia, so you can join for that one too. So like I said, tonight we're going to be talking about Gunness. It's the first of a two-part series. In a few minutes, after a quick introduction, Bruce Johnson, the writer, researcher, and narrator of the Gunness Mystery, will be joining us to give a quick introduction about the film that he made. And then after that introduction, we'll watch the film. And if there's any pressing questions, we can ask those today. But before we do that, just really quick, I wanted to show everybody a quick introduction to Zoom. I know we're about 7 months into this life we live on Zoom. So if you raise your hand, I will probably unmute you, and that'll give you the chance to ask a question live. That'll be more along the lines for tomorrow. And then also tomorrow, there'll be a Q&A that you can put your questions into, or questions into the chat. If you do those today, I will be sure to direct those to Bruce to answer for tonight. But yeah, like I said, so I just wanted to highlight a couple events we have coming up here at the library. All of these are more or less online. So Brew School, for that one, we're gonna have a certified beer judge teach us a bit about different types of beer. And the fun part of that is that you get to go to Owl's here in LaPorte and buy a sample pack of 6 different beers that the Cicerone will walk us through and tell us all about the different types of beer and what makes them different and what's unique about them for sampling beers. So then another one we have coming up is one of our health literacy events. It's called Healthy You Foam Rolling, Stretching, and Your Breath. When you register for that one, you get to check out a foam roller from the library and then join those classes. And then the last of some of these upcoming classes I wanted to highlight is Walk with a Doc, the Kilimanjaro Kickoff. So the library is sponsoring a number of participants in this walking challenge that you'll walk 44 miles over a course of 2 weeks. And yeah, you get to like log those minutes on your own. You can even log housework. So just anything to get you up and moving. The starting on the 14th and then going to 2 weeks after that. I think that takes you through maybe the end of November. Just a good time to get up and moving around a bit. It ends up being about 3 miles a day or 6,000 steps. So honestly, not that bad. So if you have any interest or want to learn more about those, you can visit our website on the events page or contact us here at the library. So as I said, this is the first of a 2-part series. Tomorrow we're going to have a panel including Bruce Johnson, a local historian, who will be speaking in just a couple minutes about the film that we're about to watch. He worked with Steve Rominski on that. Steve is a filmmaker from LaPorte County that now lives in Chicago. And then the last 2 people on your screen are Lillian and then Anna, and they are historians at the Barker Mansion. And they're going to offer a lot of context about what life was like during the Gilded Age here in LaPorte County, as well as their own expertise in Gunness. So join us tomorrow at 7. However you join today is a great way to join tomorrow. I've got it on here as 7 to 8, but usually these things go a little bit over 8, so maybe 8:15, 8:30. Very excited for that panel tomorrow. So without further ado, let's get into the film. So the Gunness Mystery won a number of awards and was the official selection for a few different film festivals. So it was an official selection at the Homegrown Hoosier Film Festival of 2011. It was the winner of the Waiwago International Film Festival in 2011, an official selection at the Riverbend Film Festival 2012, special selection at the Kozarama Trondheim International Film Festival of 2012, and an official selection of the Black Earth Film Festival 2011. So before we get started with the film, I wanted to give Mr. Johnson a chance to talk. Bruce, did you turn on your video or did you want to?
How do I do that? Click it?
It'll be down there by your mute button. There'll be one right beside it that says start video or stop video.
says the host has stopped it.
Interesting.
I don't need to be seen.
Yeah, you don't. We'll see you in about plenty tomorrow. So if you want to, there should be a button on my end. Maybe if I make you a co-host. Anyway, so if you want to make that introduction, I can pull up an attractive screen while you do that.
Okay. Bruce Johnson. I am on the board of directors of the LaPorte County Historical Society, and I have been for 35 years. I'm currently president. And back in April of 2007, I suddenly realized that in one more year, in 2008, it would be the 100th anniversary of Belle Gunness's famous fire. And I decided I wanted to volunteer to finally do a project on the true story of Belle Gunness with a visual presentation. And at the same time, I wanted to finally get some gravestones for victims who had been buried in LaPorte, who had been forgotten and never had gravestones. So that summer of 2007, I took my camera and some slide film and started photographing all the photos in our collection at the museum about Belle Gunness, and then researched the story through newspaper articles, all kinds of materials that we had in our collection. And by January of 2008, I was ready to go with a visual presentation, a slideshow, and with a screen and my projector. But also during that winter, I tried to locate living relatives of victims in hopes that they might be able to come to help me dedicate the gravestones that I was planning to put together by the spring of, in April of 2008. Then I started to offer my presentation to local organizations who would be interested in learning the true story about Belle Gunness with a visual presentation, and it went like wildfire. And one evening I was presenting it at the library, the main library in LaPorte, was standing room only all the way out the door. I happened to notice that Steve Rominski was in the audience that evening. And after the presentation was over, I said, Steve, is there any way we can put this onto DVD? And he said, yes. So although it took us 2.5 years to get the project done in our spare time, because Steve was going into Chicago to the academy every day, and I was teaching school, we did it mostly in our summers, but we finally got it done, and this is the result. We've sold DVDs from France to Australia and sold them out, sold 1,100 of them, and we've just gotten in another 1,000, and have already sold about 100 of them. So this is the work that we have put together.
Awesome. So the librarian that was at that event was telling me about how it was just people going out the door, and I can believe it. People are interested in this. So I've got that set up. I've got this set up. Bruce, did you have any last words before we start the film?
I thought that might be enough. So.
Okay, perfect. So if anybody has any questions, they can add those to the Q&A. They can add those to the chat. If you're joining us on Facebook, be sure to add that to the Facebook comments if you would like to add a question. But overall, we'll have a fantastic panel tomorrow starting at 7 p.m. So without further ado, let's start watching the Gunness Mystery.
Hi, I am Bruce Johnson, and I'm standing in the Gunness exhibit at the LaPorte County Historical Society Museum in LaPorte, Indiana. This exhibit displays photos, articles, and artifacts about a very famous farm on McClung Road. There, over 100 years ago, a series of shocking events took place that would become a horrifying part of LaPorte, Indiana's history forever. Listen as I tell the incredible true story of the mysterious Belle Gunness. Belle Gunness was born Brynhild Paulsdottir in Selbu, Norway, on November 11, 1859. Her parents were Berit Olsdottir and Paul Peterson. The village of Selbu is located southeast of Trondheim, in the central part of Norway. It lies along the shores of Lake Selbu and is known for its forests and agriculture. Selbu was officially established in 1838 and today has about 4,000 inhabitants. The quaint Lutheran church is where Belle was confirmed in 1874 and where many generations of her family were baptized, married, and buried. Belle's family were tenant farmers on a large hillside farm belonging to the Storset family. Besides working on the farm, her father also worked as a stonemason to make extra money for his family. This is the large white farmhouse and barn of the Storset family who owned the farm. Belle's family lived up the hill and through the trees. There are none of the original buildings on this part of the property today. However, a sign has been erected by local historians on the spot where Belle's family once lived. The sign shows the name of the farm and Belle's Norwegian name, Brynhild P. Storset. The P stands for Paulsdottir. If necessary, families often would take the name of the farm as their family name. 3 years before Belle came to America, she worked on a much larger farm in the area. The owners of this farm lived in the house on the right. The older building to the left is where Belle and the other farm workers lived. This might have been Belle's bedroom during the 3 years she worked on this farm. As an employee, Brynhild was reliable, hardworking, and well-liked. Belle was aunt and godmother to her older brother's son. Before leaving for America, she knitted these mittens for her little godchild. Here her great-great-nephew holds the original pair. The mittens show the Selbu rose pattern for which Selbu is famous. In 1881, at the age of 21, Brynhild left Norway on the ship Tasso and arrived in Chicago with the financial help of her sister and brother-in-law, Nellie and John Larson. She changed her name to Bella Peterson and for a time worked as a servant girl. She was married on March 19, 1884, to Mads Ditlev Anton Sorensen. He was born in Drammen, Norway, in 1854. In Chicago, he worked as a night security guard for Mandel Brothers department store. It appears the couple did not have any children of their own, but cared for several foster children. 2 of these died of colitis, which very well could have been poisoning. Carolyn died at 5 months old in 1896, and Alex was an infant when he died in 1898. Mads and Belle had a home in Chicago, which burned down. They used the insurance to buy a confectionery store at Elizabeth Street and Grand Avenue. When it burned in 1898, they used the insurance money to buy this large home at 620 Alma Street in Austin, Illinois. Belle insisted that Mads' life insurance policy was too small, so he took out a larger one. Then, mysteriously, Mads died on July 30th, 1900, the one day the 2 policies overlapped. Following investigations, there was not enough proof that Belle had murdered her husband. Belle had received $8,500 from Mads' 2 life insurance policies and decided to take her foster children and get away from Chicago. After seeing an ad in a newspaper, she traded her home in Austin for a 48-acre farm in LaPorte, Indiana. They moved in November 1901. The LaPorte County Circuit Courthouse, shown here, was built in 1892 and still stands on Main Street, now called Lincoln Way, today. Down the street on the right, at the corner of Main and Monroe, stood the large Tea Garden House Hotel. Across the street from there was the First National Bank, where Bell often did financial business. The farm was located on McClung Road, north of LaPorte. The property was well known for many years as Matty Altick's place. It was northwest of Clear Lake, between the railroad and Fish Trap Lake, and had 48 8/8 acres. The farm had several buildings, including a large, square, two-story brick and frame house that was originally situated among the trees. No photos of the original house exist today. The brick house was located to the right of the two large pine trees. It had a large living room, a dining room with an upright piano, and 4 bedrooms upstairs. The kitchen was in a white frame addition to the back of the house, and the hired man stayed in a room above the kitchen on the second floor. Bell had various types of farm equipment, as well as a small pond on the property for the animals. Bell also raised hogs on the slope along the south side of the property near a very large pond. In 1902, Bell became reacquainted with a man named Peter Gunness from Janesville, Wisconsin. He was born in Oslo, Norway in 1872 and emigrated to America in 1885. He was married on March 5, 1895 in Minnesota to Jenny Sophie Simon. After his young wife died, Bell invited him and his 2 young daughters, Swanhild and Jenny, to visit her on her farm in LaPorte. After 2 months' courtship, Peter and Bell were married by Pastor Moore of the First Baptist Church on April 1, 1902. Within the first week, Peter's youngest daughter, Jenny, died while under Bell's care. 8 months later, on December 16, 1902, Peter also died under suspicious circumstances. According to Bell, as Peter was reaching for his shoes next to the kitchen stove, a sausage grinder fell and hit him in the back of the head, and boiling water fell from the stove, scalding his neck. His death was investigated, but, again, there was not enough proof against Bell to convict her of murder. Peter's brother, Gus, came from Wisconsin and abducted Swanhild in order to save her from Bell. Now Bell was alone again to care for her foster children, Myrtle Sorensen, Lucy Sorensen, and Philip Gunness. No proof has been found to show that she ever gave birth or adopted these children. Another foster child was Jenny Olson. Jenny was born in Chicago on May 5, 1890. Her mother, Sophia Olson, died on December 31, 1890, when Jenny was only 8 months old. Anton Olson, Jenny's father, had served on ships as an engineer, carpenter, and captain with the Norwegian Maritime Service. He and his family had settled in a Scandinavian neighborhood on the southeast side of Chicago. Following the death of his wife, he was left with 4 children at the ages of 8, 6, and 3 years old, and Jenny at 7 months. Captain Olson knew Mads and Bell Sorensen and trusted them to give foster care for little Jenny. Belle had several hired men, as well as neighbors, who helped on her farm over the years. Emil Greening was hired in the fall of 1906. He and Jenny Olson had become quite fond of each other. In December, Belle told Emil that he would not see Jenny as she was going to be sent to a Lutheran school in California. Suddenly, she was gone before Christmas. Emil asked Belle for Jenny's address, but she told Emil to give her the letters and she would forward them. After the disappointment of not getting any response from Jenny, Emil moved west and settled in New Mexico. Belle hired Ray Lamphere in August 1907. Belle and he became lovers, and he hoped that they would marry so he could become a partner in the farm. Meanwhile, Belle had been placing matrimonial ads in 2 Scandinavian newspapers that were read throughout the Midwest. Her ad said, "Wanted, a woman who owns a beautifully located and valuable farm in first-class condition, wants a good and reliable man as partner and same. Some little cash is required and will be furnished first-class security." Amazingly, an unknown number of men read these ads and wrote to Belle. She responded with glowing letters, inviting them to LaPorte, where she would meet them at the depot. She said she would make life as happy as possible, and they could come and stay forever. Henry Gerhold from Scandinavia, Wisconsin, came in the spring of 1905. Like all of the other men, he was to follow Belle's rules. Sell everything you own, bring only cash, sew it in your underclothes for safety, and do not tell anyone anything. This we will keep to ourselves. Ole Budsberg was from Iola, Wisconsin. His wife had died, his children were grown, and he decided to pay a visit to Belle's farm in LaPorte in March 1907. He liked it, returned home to sell his farm to his oldest son, and went back to LaPorte with the cash, never to be seen again. Andrew Helgelien had emigrated in 1879 from Norway to the Dakota Territory. Andrew was born Anders Knutsen in 1859 near Ole, Norway. He settled by Scatterwood Lake, near what would later become Mansfield, South Dakota. After he started his farm in South Dakota, his brother Asley and several other siblings came to America too. Asley built a home near the original homestead across the lake from his brother Andrew. On New Year's Day in 1908, Andrew told Asley that he would be gone for a week to visit a woman in Indiana. After receiving more than 80 letters from Belle, Andrew Helgelien on January 2, 1908, left South Dakota by train to visit Belle and see her farm. He did not bring cash as instructed by Belle, but on January 10th, money was forwarded from his account in Aberdeen, South Dakota, to the First National Bank in LaPorte. On January 14, 1908, Belle and Andrew went to the First National Bank to cash the check. Although Andrew and the bank cashier suggested some of the money should be kept in the bank for safety, Belle insisted that they take all of it in cash. Andrew Helgelien disappeared the next day. Soon, Asley Helgelien, seen here with his wife and children, became concerned when his brother Andrew did not return from his visit to Indiana. Asley contacted the LaPorte Police, County Sheriff, First National Bank, and Belle Gunness. The bank confirmed that Andrew had been there, but Belle said he had left. Asley was determined to find his missing brother. Ray Lamphere had become very jealous of Belle's visitors, especially Andrew Helgelien. Belle fired Ray on February 3rd, but he refused to stay away from her farm. Bell had Ray arrested 4 times for trespassing: March 12th, 28th, and 31st, and April 25th. Each time he was found guilty and fined from $1 to $5. On Monday, April 27th, Bell went to her attorney, Melvin E. Leiter, and insisted that her will be written and signed that day. Her will stated that her property would go to her 3 foster children. However, if they did not outlive her, it would go to a Norwegian children's home in Chicago. Joe Maxson, who became Bell's hired man on February 13th, awoke at 4 o'clock on the morning of April 28th, 1908, to the smell of smoke. When he realized the house was on fire, he quickly tried to arouse Bell and the 3 children. After not succeeding in waking Bell and the children, Joe Maxson decided to get his horse out of the barn and head to town for the sheriff and fire department. Water from Clear Lake was used to help put out the fire. Immediately, because of his troubled past with Bell, Ray Lamphere was the prime suspect for setting the house on fire. Ray was arrested that morning for arson while working at John Wheatbrook's farm. According to Indiana law, if the bodies of Bell and the children would be in the remains of the fire, he would also be arrested for murder. Once the fire was extinguished, the chimney and the unstable brick walls were torn down. All that was left was a pile of bricks and rubble and the kitchen stove. It wasn't until 10:30 a.m. that Sheriff Smutzer had Joe Maxson and some neighborhood men begin digging in the smoldering ruins of the house to search for Bell and the 3 children. At around 3:45 in the afternoon, the diggers finally found a body of a woman and 3 children in the last corner of the basement. The woman's body was carefully removed from the rubble, and it was discovered that the body had no head. Digging continued in search of the missing head, while the bodies of the family were taken to Cutler's morgue. Meanwhile, the First National Bank decided to send copies of the LaPorte Herald and the Argus Bulletin telling about the fire to Asley Helgeline in South Dakota. On May 2, 1908, Asley Helgeline was on the train heading for LaPorte to investigate the situation. He was hoping to learn something about his missing brother. Asley arrived in LaPorte on Sunday, May 3, 1908, around midnight. He booked a room at the Tea Garden House Hotel at the corner of Main and Monroe Streets. Asley and LaPorte County Sheriff Albert Smutzer went to the farm searching for clues in the basement. Asley was sure something bad had happened to Andrew. No clues were found. Not satisfied, on May 5th, Asley returned to the farm. With the help of Joe Maxson, they began digging in a soft spot near the hog lot, where Joe and Bell had buried some garbage in March. After digging down about 4 feet, the men discovered a gunny sack. Upon opening the sack, they discovered a body. Asley Helgeline recognized his brother immediately. Andrew's head, arms, and legs had been separated from the rest of his body. The severed fingers of his right hand were still clenching some human hair. They quickly sent for Sheriff Smutzer. Then the sheriff and Joe continued to dig on the property. Immediately to the right of the first grave was discovered another. About 3 feet down, Jenny Olson's body was found on what would have been her 18th birthday. She had not gone to California, as Bell had said. In the same grave, 3 more bodies were found under hers, a man and 2 children. Sheriff Smutzer, Dr. J.H. William Meyer, and the county coroner, Dr. Charles Mack, were kept very busy at the Gunness farm as more bodies appeared. By May 6th, a total of 13 bodies had been found on Bell's property. It was quite obvious that Belle Gunness was responsible for the murders of many innocent victims who had been visiting her at the farm through her matrimonial ads. Curiosity seekers from throughout the country came to the Gunness farm to see what was happening. Extra passenger cars were added to the South Shore and other interurban railways in order to bring the crowds to LaPorte. Some visitors arrived by horse and buggy, and some by the new horseless carriage, the recently invented automobile. Many individuals rode bicycles, especially young boys who skipped school to watch the excitement. Sheriff Smutzer's red Ford runabout was the talk of the town. How could he afford to buy such an expensive car on his sheriff's salary? Rumors were rampant that he knew about the murder farm, and Belle was paying him to keep quiet. By the following Sunday, it was estimated that between 10,000 and 15,000 people had come to LaPorte to observe what was going on at Belle's farm. Families and friends posed for photos at various sites on the property. People of all ages came dressed in their Sunday best. H.E. Cook of LaPorte's Cook Photography took many photographs showing the gruesome activity at the farm. The bodies that were discovered had been dismembered. The heads, arms, and legs had been severed, placed in gunny sacks, and buried as garbage in various places on the farm. It appeared the privy or outhouse had been moved several times, and the pits were used for burying body parts too. Skulls were often buried separately. It appeared that after receiving their cash, Belle had poisoned her victims with arsenic and strychnine. Then, when they were drowsy, she hit them over the head with a hammer, cracking their skulls in the process. Next, she severed their heads and limbs and stored them in the basement with quicklime until a time for burial. Here, one of the bodies has been placed on a board while LaPorte County Coroner Dr. Mack does some investigating. Later, his autopsies on the bodies of the headless woman and the 3 children found in the basement showed signs of arsenic and strychnine in their stomachs. A temporary morgue was set up in the carriage house on the farm. Joe Maxson was assigned to be supervisor. Lines of people waited to have the opportunity to walk through the carriage house to view the grisly remains. Carts, wagons, wheelbarrows, tables, and an Arm & Hammer baking soda box held the remains of the victims. Several skulls were placed on these tables in the temporary morgue, including the head of Jenny Olson with its long blonde hair. Matt and Oscar Budsberg had been informed about the fire at the Gunness farm in LaPorte and came from Wisconsin to see if their father was one of the unfortunate victims. After viewing a skull with a mustache, they came to the conclusion that that was their father, Ole Budsberg. The biggest mystery, however, was who was the woman discovered in the ashes of the fire. Without a head, it could not be certain that it was Belle. Hundreds watched as the search continued for clues in the cellar of the house. Dr. Ira Norton, a LaPorte dentist, announced that if Belle's false teeth could be found, he could identify them. He had made a set of 6 porcelain teeth, backed with gold. Various tools were used to try and find the teeth in the debris. A gold prospector from Colorado named Louis Schultz stepped forward and sluiced through the ashes for a week. Joe Maxson and his brother-in-law, Isaiah Aldifer, were assigned to dig and screen the debris. A water wagon was hauled to the farm to use with the sluice. A total of 12 watches were found in the rubble. Some of them had the initials of victims. Several rings were discovered. Some of them had the initials of Peter Gunness and his first wife. One was carved PG to JS 3595. Mysteriously, the teeth appeared on Louis Schultz's last day on the job. There were 2 sets, an upper and a lower. Dr. Norton identified them as being Belle's teeth. However, there was a disagreement as to whether they had been through a fire. Meanwhile, the grand jury was convening to put together enough evidence against Ray Lamphere to go to trial. Here on the left are Assistant Prosecutor Martin Sutherland and Prosecuting Attorney Ralph Smith investigating the crime scene. Reverend August Johnson, the pastor of the Swedish Evangelical Lutheran Church of LaPorte, now known as Bethany, was asked to have a funeral service for Andrew Helgeline. Asley had returned to South Dakota and left $200 for a proper burial for Andrew. On May 16, 1908, at 10:30 at night, the service was held at Patton Cemetery with Reverend August Johnson officiating. It was kept secret, and there were only a small group of mourners. On June 18, 1908, the bodies of the woman and the 3 children would finally be taken to be buried in Oak Park, Illinois. This bill shows the expenses and railroad fare for the bodies and the person accompanying them. The hearse from Cutler's Funeral Home brought the bodies and caskets to the LaPorte Depot, where they would be taken to Oak Park, Illinois for burial. The white horses indicate that the bodies were women or children. Black horses were used for men's funerals. After arrival in Oak Park, Andrew Larson, the undertaker, took the caskets to be interred at Forest Home Cemetery. The bill specifically names Belle Gunness, Myrtle Sorensen, Lucy Sorensen, and Philip Gunness. The family plot on the right already had the bodies of Mad Sorensen, Carolyn Sorensen, Alex Sorensen, and Jenny Gunness, Peter's daughter. Now the remaining 4 places were filled. No gravestones were ever placed on any of the graves. On May 29th, there was an auction at the farm to sell off Belle's effects. Vendors of refreshments and postcards were making a big profit too. Visitors wanted a souvenir from the famous murder farm. A shovel worth 60 cents sold for $2.10, which would be about $40 today. Buyers thought it was possible that the shovels could have been used by Belle to bury her victims. An entrepreneur even bought Prince, Belle's collie, for $107, which would be more than $2,000 today. The dog was on exhibition in Luna Park in Chicago. The same person also bought the children's pony and cart, and the cat and her kittens. After the estate was settled, The money was to go to a Norwegian children's home in Chicago. However, they would not accept the blood money, so the money was divided among Nellie Larson's children and her brother's family in Norway. One of the farm buildings that had been used as a chicken coop was purchased and moved to K and 2nd Streets in LaPorte. It was used as a garage until 1985. When the crowds gathered at Bell's farm during the digging after the fire, many visitors would carve their names and hometowns into the buildings. This building is now part of the Bell Gunness exhibit in the LaPorte County Historical Society Museum. On May 18th, the grand jury felt they had enough evidence to go to trial. On November 9th, the process was started to choose a jury. By the following Thursday, a jury had been chosen. The trial began on Friday the 13th, November 1908. His Honor Judge J.C. Richter presided over the trial. Ralph N. Smith was the prosecuting attorney. It was his duty to prove that Ray Lamphere was guilty of arson and the murder of Belle Gunness and the 3 children. Wirt Worden was Ray Lamphere's attorney each of the 4 times Ray was arrested for trespassing on Belle's property. It was his job to prove that the headless body found in the fire was not Belle, that she had poisoned her children, that she had escaped, and that Ray Lamphere had nothing to do with this crime. Joe Maxson was one of the witnesses at the trial. He told about his waking to a room filled with smoke at 4 a.m. on April 28th, and how he tried desperately to arouse Belle and the children. He also said that he witnessed the gold miner pull the sets of false teeth from his vest pocket before announcing that he had found them in the ashes of the sluice. By November 25th, the trial had ended, and on Thanksgiving Day, November 26th, the jury found Ray Lamphere guilty of arson, but not of murder. He was sentenced to 2 to 20 years at the state penitentiary in Michigan City, Indiana. He died there a year later of tuberculosis. The big question still remains 100 years later. Did Belle Gunness die in the fire, or did she manage to escape? To observe the centennial of the famous fire, more than $3,000 was raised through donations from individuals, organizations, businesses, and the LaPorte County Historical Society in order to buy gravestones for the victims who were buried in unmarked graves. Peter Gunness and Jenny Olson had both been buried near Andrew Helgeline in Patton Cemetery in LaPorte. Peter S. Gunness, Belle's second husband, who died in December 1902, finally received a gravestone 106 years later. Jenny Olson was buried on May 20th, 1908, next to Andrew Helgeline. Reverend August Johnson of Bethany Lutheran Church did the committal service. Sigvard and Sarah Olson, Jenny's brother and sister, attended. At least 5 unknown victims were buried on 2 separate occasions in June 1908 at Pine Lake Cemetery. This memorial states, "In memory of the unidentified victims of Belle Gunness, on the 100th anniversary of the discovery of her crimes, 1908 to 2008. A memorial service and dedication of the gravestones was held on Saturday, April 26, 2008. About 35 cars were led by police escort from the LaPorte County Historical Society Museum to the 2 cemeteries. between 40 and 50 relatives of victims attended from throughout the United States. Here, relatives of Peter Gunness place a wreath in his memory at the new gravestone. On November 5, 2007, the headless body of the woman buried at Forest Home Cemetery in Oak Park, Illinois, was exhumed and taken back to Indiana for DNA testing. So it is possible that someday we may truly find out if it is the body of Belle Gunness or not. No matter what the results may be, there will always be many unanswered questions to the Gunness Mystery.
Awesome. So I think I speak for everybody when I say that was a fantastic documentary that you made, Bruce and Steve. I wonder if Steve ever joined. And I'd like to share a couple links that I have saved over here. So you can learn more about Belle Gunness, not only through this video, but I've got some links that go to some resources, not only at the library, but Bruce's write-up on the Historical Society. So the library also has some local resources in the local, I keep saying local. Yes, I do have my sound on, excuse me. Our digital resources. The second link under the LaPorte Public Library goes to our Belle Gunness digital collection, and that is a lot of the newspaper about the trial and the discovery of the bodies. And then I linked directly to one about how this guy said he saw her in the middle of the night a couple days after the fire. Bruce, did you have anything you wanted to say after the film?
I'm not sure what it would be.
Oh goodness, I'm sorry, I sent the links just to the panelists. There we go. Now you can see the links, everybody. And they're also available on Facebook, because you can either save those now or they'll be on Facebook. Sorry, Bruce, I cut you off.
One of the things I wanted to say was that when we put this all together, Steve and I, suddenly realized we needed music for the background. And I started researching music and realized I had no idea where to go. I did study music of themes from famous murder mystery movies. And I eventually decided to do the music myself. I had learned that Johann Sebastian Bach would get melodies for some of his compositions by spelling out words on the keyboard. And so I did the same thing. I wrote on my piano keyboard the letters from A all the way up to Z. And then I started spelling out Belle, B-E-L-L-E, and then played that on the piano. And Gunness, and that is the murder theme that you heard throughout the movie.
Fantastic, cool.
I put it into, it was in the key of C major, but it was too nice, so I changed it to C minor, and that made it really mysterious. But I ended up writing 4 pieces, and I play all the music too.
And then I saw that you got to go to Selbu.
I've been to Selbu, Norway twice. Yeah, to do
Awesome.
investigating and staying with friends who have stayed with me, doing research as well. Over the years, they've come to Laporte, several people, and stayed at my house for a week each, doing things about Gunness. And then I went and stayed in their homes in Norway and also did research over there.
Well, that's a proper international exchange of ideas. That's pretty cool.
Steve and I went to the Trondheim International Film Festival in Trondheim, Norway in 2011.
That sounds like a treat. He was supposed to be in Tokyo this summer for the Olympics, and one of several disappointments, I'm sure.
Sure. Next year.
So without further ado, we will call tonight. And then tomorrow we will have the panel discussion that'll start at 7 p.m. It'll start off with, let me get those faces up there again. Boop, boop, boop. It's actually more work than it needs to be. Bruce will be there, Steve will be there, Lillian and Anna from the Barker Mansion will be there. So bring your questions and we'll get those answered. You can join right here on Zoom or on Facebook. However you join today is a great way to join tomorrow. Thank you everyone for attending tonight. And have a good night.